Dr. Seema Rao, I have 2 questions for you.
Yes, what are they?
Number 1, I'm 8 years old and I've seen many kids being bullied.
Okay.
I've also experienced it myself. From your story, I know that you were bullied. Can you tell me and all the other kids out there about it? Question number 2.
Yeah. Okay. First and foremost, let me say that I'm extremely happy to be here with you wonderful people. And otherwise, my life is all about commando training. I'm India's first and only woman commando trainer. Yes, I train men commandos. And thank you. And I go to the nook and corner of the country. I go to ice-clad mountains, scorching hot deserts, and dense jungles, and I train the commandos. So if you look at me, you'll wonder how I reached commando training. Well, it was not my life's design to be there. We all believe in destiny, so that's what destiny had something else in mind for me. So I started off as a doctor, but ended up training commandos of the Indian forces. I'm going to talk about my childhood because I think, certain incidents in our life change the way we think and change what we want to become. One of the incidents was way back in school. What's your age?
8.
8. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old when there was an incident in school that, changed me. There were these, girls in our class, and they were, ones who had failed the class. So they were about 2 years elder to all of us. So one day, what those girls did is they, lit some firecrackers under the desk, and one of the girls' uniform caught fire. And everybody ran helter-skelter, and there was only this girl whose uniform caught fire, and obviously she was hospitalized. And everybody was asked in the class that who was responsible for this. Nobody owned up. Now, the thing is that I am also the daughter of a freedom fighter. I was very close to my father. So I think a certain degree of righteousness is, what I had inside me, which I realized when this incident happened, and, I realized that I was the only one to tell, the staff, the teachers, that it was these girls who were responsible for that incident. Nobody else said anything, but I was the only one. I was afraid, there's no doubt about that, but somewhere I thought it was just unjust, and I thought that, people who are responsible for doing harm to somebody else should be taken to task. So that was what happened then, and of course I paid the price for that because, about a few days later, my exams were around the corner. Those girls were taken to task and they were punished. So they had to get back. So one day when the school left and we were all leaving the classroom, I was the last one to get out. And these girls cornered me in the corridor. They caught hold of my hands. They pulled my bag. They removed my journal and they tore it to pieces in front of my eyes. Now, when you're the studious type and you see your journal being torn and the exam round the corner and you know that it's going to cost you your marks. So I looked at them with disbelief, tears in my eyes, and I couldn't do anything about that. And I still remember that helplessness that I felt at that time. Years later, I would like to tell you about another incident, but this was, when I was about 17 or 18 years old. So I met this young Dr. Male. He was into martial art, and then that's when I realized that if I had to change from weakness to strength, then this was one way I could do that. So I started learning from him, and there was this incident which again changed me forever. We used to live in Chowpatty, very close by, so we used to go to the beach and we used to practice martial art. Let me say that we are a very, very bonded couple. In fact, in the forces, people call us the ideal buddy pair. The ideal buddy pair is a concept where two people are that close that I can trust my back and that nobody is going to shoot from there because of him, and the same with him. So coming back to the story, so we were training over there on the beach, and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a hot, sunny day. And the beach was getting empty. It was time for us to go back. When suddenly there were a group of these, rack pickers who were passing by. And they happened to look down and see what we were doing. And they started passing lewd, demeaning remarks at me. We decided to just ignore them, continue with the training. And once we got off, they were standing at a distance, and we had to pass by from that route. So my husband said that, okay, now that those guys are there, you're going to have to face them. And saying this, he moved out of that place. I think that was very important. I thank him for that, because I think that day I decided, or I learned to fight my own battles. As I walked towards them, I was very scared, so I decided that maybe I'll just walk across and finish with the whole thing. And suddenly one of the guys came and stood in front of me. I was looking down and he was in front of me. I moved to the left, he moved in front of me. I moved to the right, he moved in front of me again. So he was obstructing my path. I was looking down and I was very scared. And slowly I looked up at him. And what
kids' minds are. And what I'd love to do next is to stitch that up with a personal favorite story of mine. And I hope this dazzles you as much as it dazzled me, and then we can get into a discussion with you guys as to what you think, how fair or unfair the world has been. I do want to start with a disclaimer that my job in this panel is to bring the law of averages of some power-hitting women out here down a bit, because that's what I do. But quick show of hands. Has anyone heard of Henrietta Living? Henrietta Living?
The one with the genome that was supposed to cure something.
Close. She was an astrophysicist. Slightly different stream, but
There you go.
getting there.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
We can combine this by the end of the evening. So the story of Henrietta Living is a remarkable one for the simple reason that most folks don't know who she is. And her contribution to the world and the universe is remarkable. So here's what she did. Henrietta Living in the late 1800s was hired by Dr. Pickering at Harvard. And there was a team of 80 women that he put together. And they were known as the human computer. And what these people did was fascinating. They looked at photographic evidence of what's called Cepheid stars. So they just stared up in the sky, looked at stars, kept plotting it on a piece of glass, year after year after year for at least 11 years from what I remember. And then these women literally computed manually by hand the rate of the flicker, extrapolated it to the movement of the stars, and that led to Hubble looking at these things together, and he said, wait a minute, over the last 20 years, these stars have moved apart, which means that the universe is expanding. And the inverse of that is that if it's expanding, and if you contract it, it all started with a bang. That led to the Big Bang. And this was 80 women who worked on this, got zero credit, and the fact that nobody here can name any of them is testimony to the fact that women don't get as much credit as they probably do. I'm going to make the story a little worse. The nickname for these women was Pickering's harem. Dr. Pickering is the guy who picked them. But these women were known as Pickering's harem. So on that note, in your own streams, clearly I'm sure you've dealt with issues where you've been looked down or up purely on account of your gender. Right? I would love to hear your stories of what you had to go through, and it would be great if you can have one personal anecdote of a gender bias, and how do you fight it? It's one thing to read about this in the newspapers, but what would be remarkable is if there's something you can touch upon at a personal level that we can relate to. Any order?
Okay. I don't think necessarily that it's always connected with your profession. There are some issues that women have and will always have. And I think we have to not accept it, but be proud of it, live with it, see how we can work with it. And in 2000, I organized a conference for women in architecture. And 10 years before that, I had tried to organize one when I said I wanted women's work to have an exhibition, but it should be their work. It should not be women who had worked with their fathers or their brothers or their husbands, because that's what happens in architecture. The women always pushed back. And I didn't get any response. But 10 years later, in 2000, when I sent out the same thing, but I made one difference. I said, even if you work with your father, brother, or husband, if the work is yours, you can participate and take part in this exhibition. And things had changed hugely. So change is always happening. And I always look at it as a celebration and not to make excuses. I've been working now 40 years, and I never thought that I'm in a man's profession all the time or that it's a struggle. I think one accepted certain issues and worked within those constraints, because we have advantages too. It's not that we don't have advantages being women, but I know it's not easy. But I do want to say one thing that bothered me. I was on a committee in Delhi, in the Paryavaran Bhavan, which is the Ministry of Environment, and I was on that committee. And I had to fly to Delhi and reach the Paryavaran Bhavan before 10 o'clock and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to catch the flight. And I would reach there and I would ask, well, where's the women's toilet? And there wasn't a single toilet in that whole building, except in one corner there was a filthy toilet which was locked up. So this indifference to women's needs is not just at a high level, it works right down. A few years later, I had studied at Smith College and I got a doctorate there. And one of the other women who was given an honorary doctorate was the first woman at the American Stock Exchange in New York. And she said when she began work, there wasn't even a toilet in the entire building for women. And she had to go out of the building and go to the next building. So there are many, many issues that we have to overcome. But we're strong. And I think if we love what we do with a passion, we keep our integrity and our value systems intact, we will shine always.
Well, mine is, physical.
I have to say that I've never really experienced it, but maybe now when I think about it, maybe it's the way that I was brought up. It never sort of, I didn't look at it through that lens ever. So maybe there have been instances where I have faced that sort of discrimination of male versus female, girl, boy, but maybe I just didn't register it because that's not the way. I've grown up in a family, there's just me and my sister, we're two girls, and we were never made to feel like we cannot accomplish something because we're girls. I started playing badminton at a very young age. Girls and boys traveled together, we played together, we stayed in dormitories together. We had the same issues of like not having toilets or not having, water to shower. So the issues in that sense have been the same. Again, maybe if I think of it, maybe the prize money that the guys got was a little more than what the girls get. Today in film, there's no lack of opportunity. Sure, in the kind of films that we've made, maybe say a couple of years ago, and the place of a woman in a film versus how those roles have changed today are very different. And of course the pay, which is again something that, I'd like to speak for myself and say that for myself, I think I've been able to bridge that gap in terms of what my male contemporaries are getting versus what I'm getting paid. There was a recent incident where a director offered us a film and said, creatively I liked it. And then it came to sort of talking about the monies, and I said, okay, so this is what I would charge. And it kind of went back and forth where he came back and said, actually, we won't be able to afford this because we have to accommodate the male, So I said, okay, then tata, goodbye, because I know my track record. I know what I'm worth. I know that his films haven't been doing as well as my films have been doing. So it made absolutely no sense. So I was okay to say no to that film based on that one thing, because I just thought it was unfair. And I'm ready today to take those steps or measures or decisions for myself, because I'm going to be able to sleep peacefully at night. I don't think I'd be able to live with that sort of thought, knowing that I've been a part of a film, had the same sort of creative contribution, or bringing the same sort of value to a film, but being underpaid. I was not okay with that. So I think some of those instances, but I think broadly, I've never been made to feel less or not being able to achieve something because of being a woman.
If I may just say one thing here, since Deepika said that, we did a survey of women and successful women. And I also have just one sister. We're just two girls in the family. And strangely enough, they found where there were only daughters, the confidence level was different than when there were sons as well in those families, at least maybe a generation before. So that's interesting.
That's a great insight. Before we go to Aditi, there's a beautiful research. There's a beautiful research by Gina Davis about I forget what the technical term is, the extras in the movie. Over a span of about 800 Hollywood films, turns out that 90% of the background extras are male. So to your point of subconscious conditioning as to what one sees on screen and what goes on literally in the background. I thought it was a remarkable statistic which just goes unnoticed.